Hello. Hello. I knew this video was a bad idea. Today I'd like to speak about transitions. What does happen from point A to point B? Why should you care? Because life is a transition, right? Today we will tackle this topic from a visual perspective. The reason why is like in art and design, you can see, you can perceive, you can really touch with your own hands how a transition looks like. Transitions versus transformation. What's the difference? Transformation is a kind of a buzzword in our industry, and it does give you the idea that something can change overnight. It kind of forgets about one actor that I think we should make sure that we put in the equation all the time. Time. Exactly. Transition, the idea of transition, the concept of transition makes clear that to go from point A to point B, it takes time and often quite some struggle. I put three kinds of transitions together for you. The first one, transition towards what? You don't know where you're going. The second one, you think you know where you're going, but you're actually going somewhere else. The third one, you know where you want to go, but you don't know how. Let's start from the first one. Transition towards what? Let me invite a couple of friends to our chat. Two artists, beginning of the last century, weren't quite sure about where they were going. Picasso, you may have heard about him before, and George Braque, who is less well known than Picasso. This is what Picasso was painting in 1903, and this is what Braque was painting in 1906. They are still quite young, and they are trying to find their way. They were both connected visually by the deep appreciation and love towards a French master called Paul Cézanne. Paul Cézanne died in 1906, and in 1907 the first big exhibition, retrospective exhibition about his work is held in Paris. Needless to say that the guys quite enjoyed it. Okay, but what's the deal with Cézanne? Why do the guys like him so much? If you look at this painting here, shapes and colors are reduced to the very minimum because he's trying to grasp the truth from the reality and from nature around us. That's quite ambitious, right? But serious stuff. Picasso and Braque kind of wanted to do the same, but they didn't know how yet. In 1907, Picasso paints Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. This is considered as the first Cubist painting. If you notice here, the space, Picasso starts breaking the space, starts to fragment the space. And that's not only because of the look of it or for an aesthetics reason, but there's a very even scientific reason for it. Because if you take my notebook, we're still looking for the truth, because that's what really matters, right? And this notebook that you can see right now, this is certainly true. This is true as well. What about this? And what about this? Aren't these sides true as well? They are indeed as this and this. Why shouldn't you represent all these sides, all these pieces of reality at the same time? And that's what makes Cubism. That's the very core of the Cubism concept, really. Picasso doesn't really know how to deal with his painting, but he does decide that he wants to show it to some people that were visiting his studio. And guess what? Braque was one of them. From that moment on, they become friends. And they start working together and visiting each other's studio to get inspiration every day. A few years later, you can say who painted what. This is from Braque and this is from Picasso. It's almost impossible to understand the difference between them. What can we learn from this transition then? From the beginning of the century where the two guys didn't know really where they were going and the flourishing of Cubism. First, to build on top of someone else's idea is not a bad move. The second learning is find a good pal. It will make your work much better. Second transition is you think you know where you're going, but you actually end up somewhere else. And that's the case of Bauhaus. 1919, Germany, the design school before design was a thing at all. Only a few years before, 1917, Duchamp, French people, pushed an urinal inside an art exhibition. And urinal becomes an artwork. Bauhaus' response is, hey guys, we need to come back to the craft because have a look around. Society is changing and we can be an active part in transforming and in shaping society and behaviors. And that's what the role of an artist should be instead of pushing random stuff in art exhibitions for like a few rich people that can afford it. The goal was to make affordable and functional designs for the new society. What they wanted to do was to change this. This is how a flat in last century was looking like, the beginning of the last century was looking like, and that's where Bauhaus wanted to go. New way of living. In the 30s, Bauhaus was shut down for political reasons. And the other day I just thought I really like some Bauhaus stuff. The designs are still so relevant and so beautiful. And I had a look around and wow, they are very expensive. Even to buy a chair like this, you need to spend thousands of euros. And that's not quite the starting point, and that's not quite like the vision that Bauhaus and their first director, Gropius, had back then. So what do we learn from this transition? It doesn't really matter how good your project is, it doesn't really matter how good your vision is. The society around you and time reshape everything. The third transition is you know exactly where do you want to go, but you don't know how. Rome, 1506. Laocoon and his sons is a statue that is found buried. A few artists run there to have a look, and they see this beautiful, incredible statue that, to make a comparison, would look like if you were finding a 2050 new Tesla buried in your garden. That was kind of a feeling like, Jesus Christ. In the Renaissance and at that point in time, they were really, really obsessed by the Romans and the Greeks and all the beauty they created, and the fact that it kind of seemed like they couldn't really achieve, society really couldn't achieve that level of sophistication, really. So how can you set a goal around being able of do something that someone else was capable of doing 1,000 years ago? Does it make any sense? And that's what we learn from Michelangelo, and that's his Moses. Sometimes it's about challenging your goal. Maybe that's not exactly where you do want to go, and it's far better to go your own way. And here's the conclusion. A speech is a transition. It gets from point A to point B, the opening and the conclusion, passing through three main points, the three kinds of transitions we talked about. We didn't know where we were going. I didn't know it as well. But wherever you are right now, I hope that you did enjoy the journey. That's what a transition is all about. Thank you.